today, our guest speaker is Kailee Scales, who is a global strategist, founder of ThinkFree Global Strategies, and former managing director of the Black Lives Matter Global Network. Kailee has worked on all sorts of things, global development, social justice, fundraising. I don't think I can list everything, Kailee. Could you introduce yourself a little bit and give us more of a background?
That was pretty good. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. I really appreciate, first, I just want to say thanks, Tor, for inviting me to speak to your incredible class. I got the opportunity to talk to Tor a few weeks ago, and he told me about this class and all of the things that his students are learning, and all of the things that you guys are doing. And it sounds really exciting. And I'm very honored to be a part of this conversation. I also really understand that the technical difficulties. I understand how hard it is to attend school in this way. And so, everyone has different broadband issues, everyone has different capacity. So I really appreciate each and every one of you for taking the time to listen to me babble on today, given all of the challenges that we're all facing. So me, yes, as Tor said, I've been working for various progressive organizations over the past 2 decades. I've worked in 14 countries, over 5 continents. I've worked for different progressive issues, racial injustice, as Tor said, as the leader of Black Lives Matter Global Network. As managing director, I was the chief executive for the movement for 3+ years. Brought the organization, built infrastructure around the organization. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Built its digital strategy, etc. In addition to that, over the past 20 years, I've worked for, as I said, various progressive issues, including climate change, educational and health and equity, economic development for local entrepreneurs in post-conflict and developing countries. And so in those roles, I led teams to either fundraise, build programming, develop different systems and processes to advance the agenda of these organizations. And now, with this company that I founded, I'm able to work with different organizations, whether it be corporate or nonprofit or educational institutions, as they are building out their progressive strategies, as they're building out their racial equity strategies and activities. And I work with them, I build these strategies with them, I consult with them, I do some one-on-one consulting, I do with executives, all kinds of exciting things. So anyway. Yeah.
A wide range of things, but still kind of around some central philosophies, social change, social justice, economic justice, things like that. So I think our students would actually be interested in like 2 sides of this. One is, your thoughts on how communication has changed, how social media has changed or has affected social change. Like we've seen a lot of social change movements, including Black Lives Matter, over the last decade, rising up using technology and digital communications. It'd be great to hear more about your thoughts on that, and also just like, your practical day-to-day work around that. What did that look like?
You're absolutely right. In the 2 decades that I've been in this, working in this space, I've seen things markedly shift with the advent of social media. In particular, millennials and Gen Z are very much activists. They're very much involved. They're political, they're smart, and they are finding their pathway to changing and transforming the world through social media activism. It's just as simple as that. Through hashtags have become extremely important in making sure that people are convening under, like-minded situations. You're able to literally build political homes online. Instagram has been transitioned and has been taken over politically. I've watched this happen over the past 3 years, in particular, working with Black Lives Matter, which started literally as a hashtag. Imagine that.
Right.
And in case anyone doesn't know the story is that the 3 co-founders, all Black women, 2 identifying as queer, were organizers mainly on the West Coast. And so they were doing different organizing in their local areas, working specifically to improve the material conditions of their lives and others' lives. And they were very active in particular around after Trayvon Martin was killed by George Zimmerman. So if you were, I don't know if you remember, but at the time, I think it was 2013. At that time, George Zimmerman wasn't initially brought to justice. George Zimmerman was not even arrested for the murder of Trayvon Martin due to something called the Stand Your Ground law in Florida. And as a result of that, that wasn't good enough for a lot of people. And so organizers really rallied around ensuring that George Zimmerman was arrested and brought to justice. So he subsequently was, as we know. He went to trial and then he was acquitted. And this was devastating to many, many people, including those organizers who rallied to get him at minimum brought to justice. No one suspected for a minute that he would not be fully responsible for the murder of Trayvon Martin. So when he was acquitted, some of the organizers on the ground were hearing things in their communities about, how they weren't surprised and how, this is just one of the many, many cases of Black people not getting justice. And Alicia Garza, one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter, wrote a love letter on Facebook once again. And she wrote this love letter, and in it, she said that our lives matter, that she loves Black people, that we matter, and Black Lives Matter. And Patrisse Cullors, another co-founder, hashtag those words, Black Lives Matter. And overnight, those words went viral, and people all over the world began using that hashtag. And this is how the movement was born and was created and became an organization and was able to build infrastructure. And after the death of George Floyd, really expanded into this multi-million-dollar organization that grants other organizations. So again, this is really the power of social media and the power of people coming together. And it really has transformed into the most relevant social movement in recent history, in our history. And it's because of a hashtag, it's because of social media, it's because of the difference that we see in the way that we can utilize technology in spreading a message and spreading our words in gathering together and in creating this political home for as many people around the globe that want to participate.
So social media sort of became a force for organizing online in ways that we could never organize offline before, but then people got together in the real world to make change, to march, to form protests. We weren't able to do that 20, 30 years ago. We did not have that kind of power, right? This is
in the same way. So, organizing goes back many, many years. Obviously, this is the new iteration of the civil rights movement. So organizing did happen, but not in the same way. So when organizing happened before, it was very word of mouth. It was, organizing was very organized. It was in nomenclature, right? And so people used different methods of communication across state lines in order to be coordinated. So people did coordinate. It was the point. However, social media made that incredibly easier and allowed people to come out in droves. That's why we saw millions of people around the world over the summer protesting for the same reason, because social media was there. Our organizers at Black Lives Matter used social media in order to let people know where they'd be, where to go, how to organize, and not just physically on the ground organizing, because that did allow for a lot of that. Like, I don't know if anyone on the Zoom participated in any of the protests over the summer, but if you did, you probably found out about it through social media. But as you were saying, Tor, it's not just the physical organizing on the ground, but there are things that we're also seeing, like we're able to have petitions signed. There was a petition right after George Floyd was killed that I set out from Black Lives Matter. And that petition got over 2 million signatures in the course of 48 hours because it was an online petition and raised $5 million. One petition, just because of the ability to send it out through social media. We posted it online. We sent it out to our, at that time, I think we had maybe 300,000 mailing. We had a mailing list of 300,000 after George Floyd. That all changed in 48 hours. But again, it wasn't just physical on the ground organizing. It allows you to sign petitions. It allows you to write to your council members and your decision makers, your senators, all of the people that make decisions on your behalf. You're able to now inundate them with your messaging, whereas it might have been a little bit more difficult before, and you'd have to like figure it out, and how do I call, and the line's busy. Now you can fill people's inboxes, and we're able to share that information. That's why people, like with Ahmaud Arbery, for example, a gentleman that was killed by white supremacists shortly before George Floyd was killed. Again, those white supremacists were not brought to justice until we circulated the names of the DA and, you know, insisted that people make calls. And all over the world, people were able to make change. So not just physically on the ground, but in ways that have a very strong demonstrable impact in people's communities and in people's lives.
Yeah, it became a rallying cry online that turned into real action and change. Now, I think, let's see, George Floyd was killed on May 25th, which is exactly 7 weeks from today. Like the anniversary is 7 weeks from today. You were managing Black Lives Matter, Global Network, social media, video production, all of that stuff when that happened. And a lot of your work went viral. I'm curious, can you talk more about, you know, like what you decided to produce and how you pushed it out and managing that process?
Yeah, so George Floyd was killed, you know, a few months after we'd all been in lockdown, so due to the coronavirus. So at that time, I was already, and my team, we were already in the mindset of how to of transitioning our communication strategy to focus more online. We'd already been doing that because my role, unlike many of our organizers on the ground, was really cultivating and curating the constituents around the world. You know, those who could not be on the front line, those who weren't able to be on the front line, but still wanted to participate. My role was helping curate that group of individuals. And so I was already in this mindset. I'd launched a web series and some other types of informational activities in order for us to communicate, even though we were, and organizing in particular was shifting at that time and not really understanding what to do because a lot of it is on the ground. So even just general organizing was we were adapting that style, organizing style. So we were already kind of in the mindset of we're communicating in the broad media. We're communicating much more proficiently and consistently through social media. We're sending more emails. I wanted to like email our small group of constituents at least weekly. That was the goal, even before George Floyd was killed, just to keep people in the mix. You know, we developed some tools on the website in order to engage people. It was really important to ensure that our community and other communities and marginalized communities that were last to receive resources and last to receive information were able to find their political home and go to our website and find out where to find mutual aid or anything else that was going on in their local community. So I made sure that we developed that very, very quickly on our website, a place for resources. As I said, I started interviewing like doctors and things like that. So people had places to get communication and pushing that out. I think we produced like 6 or 7 web series in the course of 3 weeks. In order to, my team was like, why do you do this? And I was like, listen. And so we were able to do that. So when George Floyd died, we were already sort of in that mindset of how to have big impact and how to communicate. And we were already kind of thinking through that. And for me personally, it was a very difficult time because as for everyone, I felt for me in particular, because, you know, I felt like I was just like tweeting about, like, we were just like, I've been doing this for years. Like, what's going on? Like, it was just so upsetting for me because I felt like just the cavalier and just the way George Floyd was killed was just so difficult after being fully immersed in this work for so long. And just to see, you know, someone just ignore everything. And you just feel like you have an impact. You feel like people are more aware and wouldn't do something like that, given the hard work that me and so many other people are putting into the world. It's just like, what does anyone even listening? Like, is anyone even,
right?
Does it even matter? And it was really hard for me. And so, and for many, I'm just, this is my experience. And so during that time, I remember that day, it was just, I still met with my team. My team members were like, you just sound terrible. And I'm a pretty, it was years of this work. He wasn't the first person. So, but this was different for me. It felt different for me. And I remember right after I found out, the way I found out was that I was, again, tweeting, using social media, and I was tweeting to promote something else for BLM. And I saw that BLM, Black Lives Matter, was trending. The hashtag was trending. And when Black Lives Matter trends, it's not really great news.
That might be bad news. Yeah, right.
And I don't even remember in the course of the years that I'd been there at that point, if I'd even remembered a time when it was trending. And so I was like, oh, what's going on? And so when, that's when I saw the video. And at that time, George Floyd hadn't been named yet. It was just a man that was killed on camera. And I was just immediately devastated. And I don't even remember what I was planning on tweeting, but instead I tweeted, which I sort of remember, but it said something like, his name was George Floyd, say his name, pray for his family, fight for justice, and then a hashtag Black Lives Matter. And I watched that tweet just ignite, and I knew it was different. I knew that people felt the same way I felt. People were just like, seriously? Like, really? Like, were we not just talking about this? And I realized that we all needed to mourn this, that we all needed to express our pain because we shared that pain. And if I felt isolated in my pain, then I knew others did as well. And so I don't know why, I think I was talking to someone else on my team, and I was talking about social media again. And I said something to the effect of, can we create for social media, for Instagram, can we create a graphic for George Floyd? And I said, I heard myself say, can we, just use the template. And I realized that we had a template for people who were killed by police or vigilante violence, that there was a template for Black death, and not just people who were killed, but just people who died, and there was a template for Black death. And I realized then that this was serious, and that enough, like, I just felt like enough. And I felt like maybe if people knew what I knew, maybe if people knew that there was a template, maybe if people saw that this wasn't isolated, maybe if people felt this pain, then we would all say enough is enough. So that moment, I knew what to do. And so I called my creative team, and I was like, we need to create a video. We need to create something. Sure, we've done this before. We've created like 1-minute shorts and things like that. So it's like, we need to do something to share that message, to bring us all together, to share our voices, and to show people that this is not isolated, and to honor those that have been slain, and to ignite people's passion and imagination, to allow them to understand that this is a systemic problem that we must stop. And so what I did was, I don't know why, I just knew that's what we needed to do. And I started like taking screenshots of different tweets, because I saw people's response to my tweet, and I had also posted that tweet to Instagram, and I started taking screenshots of those responses. And I knew that I wanted to include that in this video. And I just told my team, I'm like, I don't care. I don't know nobody's sleeping. This just has to be done within now, like, just get it done. And we actually got it done in 2 days. I don't know how, but I took all these screenshots, and then all my friends and people I knew started calling me and texting me. And that's, again, when I knew things were different, because everyone knew where I worked, and they were like, what are we doing? What's going on? We've got to stop this. And I asked all of those people to read these screenshots. I also took a list of names of both men and women who'd been slain by police. And I asked people to just read them and send them to me in voice memos. And I spoke to our creative team, and I tried to figure out what we were going to do. We decided to do a montage of people, and we decided to really, because I let them know that we had to resonate that this wasn't new, that this was an assault on mankind. And so we decided, or not we, the creative director decided that the way to do that would be to connect through technology, to connect all the photos of people through their eyes, in order to ensure that people connected with the humanity of the individuals who'd been killed, because it could become, you know, just names and faces, but we needed to really resonate that humanity. And you know, I don't know if you have a tour, if the folks have seen it, if we can show it, but we definitely, we dropped it within 48 hours. It was a minute and a half. It was a Friday night, and somebody said there are no weekends. So I was like, do we wait till Monday? They're like, for what? There's no weekends anymore. And by the Monday, it had been viewed 12 million times. And then the ad council picked it up, and then, and it was seen, it was shown big, huge in Times Square, on the Staples Center. I'd also asked an artist to create an image of George Floyd, an artist that we worked with. That image went viral. It was picked up by CBS. It was played during the BET Awards. It was just, it was everywhere. And a lot of people saw it. And I think that, you know, after that, there were other activities. Like I said, that was when the petition came out, and that was when a lot of these other media engagement, because I wanted people to feel like they were doing something. And so we were able to create a lot of that as well. But it gave people the opportunity to feel, if they couldn't get outside, feel connected, and be to a bigger group and be active.
So my browser's being stupid here. I'm trying to find the URL to the video on YouTube, and we can paste it into the text chat. I don't know if you have that handy.
I can find it pretty quickly.
You know, the things you're talking about intersect with what our students are studying in a lot of ways. Sure, we could talk about the practical aspects of, okay, you produced a video and you produced it really quickly, using a community of resources, people sending you recordings, you taking shots of tweets and stuff to create this very powerful video to communicate your message. And so there's, you know, there's technical aspects of video production. We could talk about all that. Then there's this like bizarre philosophical thing that you just pointed out, that you had a template for Black people dying. That's insane, right? That it happens so frequently and it's so predictably that you could just fill out a form, right? A form graphic. That's really disturbing. That is really disturbing. But you're also managing this. It's not really crisis management in a sense. Like it is, but it's not like corporate crisis management. It's social crisis management that you're doing,
right?
Where you have to react on a regular basis, on a minute by minute, and not sleep for 2 days, apparently, basis to these changing grounds, right?
Yeah, it was, I think that right after that, so I didn't sleep for those days. I didn't sleep for about 6 weeks after that. So I didn't sleep for those days, literally. I don't remember a lot of it. Thankfully, I've written it all down. But I didn't sleep right after that. And then what happened was, you may have heard, I don't even remember like when stuff happened, but shortly thereafter, Blackout Tuesday happened. And you may have heard about Blackout Tuesday. And yes, that was this attempt of the music industry. It actually started in the music industry to bring awareness and acknowledgement to to Black death. And it was, again, the social media, it started out having very controversial response. Many activists were just like, we can't black out. And you know, I was asked to say something and I was like, no, I'm not saying anything. Like, if that's how people want to roll, like, thank you, people. And so it was just another opportunity for people to share their grief and to share and to feel active if they couldn't be on the front lines. And that really was huge. Like, it was really much bigger than people thought it was going to be. I know around the world, within Black-led movement organizations, I don't know what the final tally was, but I'm pretty sure it raised hundreds of millions of dollars for organizations because people were just aware. And that's just the power of a blackout box. And I know many people feel like it's not enough, and many people feel like it is just there's a word and I don't remember what it is, but it's something to the effect of like social media activism, and people sort of look down on that, but I don't, because I believe in the power of individuals. I believe in our power together. I believe in our ability to transform not just the world, but ourselves. And those moments and however we need to show up allows us to transform ourselves, even for a moment. And that moment never leaves us. So even if we go back to our old ways, we don't forget. Our bodies don't forget, our minds, our souls do not forget those moments that we felt, traumatized and in pain. And we will come back to that. We will, yes, yeah, performative. Yes, so you're right, exactly. Somebody used the word performative, and that is the word. Mm-hmm. And so, and while, again, it is something that people are accused of doing oftentimes and not really digging very deep. Sometimes people have to start somewhere, and sometimes people have to engage in ways that allows their minds, their bodies, their spirits to open and to become ready for the transformation to come. And it is up to others of us who are able to be more than just performative, who are able to be on the ground, or who are able to create programming and have decisions and have ideas that they've been working on for many, many, many years and push those to the forefront. It's up to us to, kick that whole, so the window is open, it's up to us to kick the whole door down. And then the others hopefully soon will follow. But, what we've learned over the past few years, months, hopefully for many of us, is that we have some really deep systemic issues that we have to address. We have things that cannot be solved through performative action, that we need to really dismantle systems and barriers that have prevented many people from not just thriving, but simply surviving. And in order to do that, it requires everyone's work. It requires everyone's action. And I'm happy to see people show up where they're going to show up, because I know that people like me and others will roll up our sleeves, and we're going to get to some of the hard work, and hopefully others will join us.
Mm-hmm. So, our students are studying graphic design, web design, video editing, things like game design even, and 3D animation and so on. These are the tools you use to communicate, right? These are the tools that help shape the message. They are not the message though, right? They are just the platform to communicate the message. Can you talk about, you mentioned a video a moment ago, which is powerful, and I see there's a couple links here. Thank you. Can you just talk about the power of design in the messaging, whether it's through Black Lives Matter or elsewhere?
Yes, I've always been a strong proponent of good design. I think that we as people, and there's a big connection between, when we think about politics, there's a big connection between art and politics, right? We've seen that throughout the course of the Black arts movement, which is closely tied to the Black liberation movement, which was born inside the civil rights movement. I relaunched our Black Lives Matter arts and culture vertical in order to engage artists, because people change their minds through through art. People are able to move the needle. People are able to create social change through participating in, appreciating, and enjoying art, because art is this great equalizer. We're able to understand complex concepts. We're able to engage with one another. We're able to connect. If we don't connect politically, we're able to connect aesthetically through art. And I feel that, and obviously design is connected to art. And design allows for people to really understand complex issues. It allows for people to really understand messaging, as you said. It allows people to participate in a game and to connect with different things. It allows people to do things and to understand things that they wouldn't ordinarily do or understand, because they're able to participate in them in a different way, in a very accessible way. So this is why design is transformative. And I would always encourage any designer to really understand the power of what they're doing and the transformative impact of design on the world in general, on culture, on politics, on messaging, on advertisement. That's why design is so important in all of those areas, because you're really able to connect with people in a different way. And so there's a whole lot of responsibility that comes along with the artistic creativity that design and designers have. So I applaud all of you, and I hope that you all understand really the impact and power of the choice and the career choices that you're making.
We were talking to a designer recently, and he commented that if a designer would have a superpower, it would be empathy. And in the business world, that means empathy for the customer. Like, you're supposed to design something that helps connect with the customer so they buy your thing, right? So it feels more transactional than it really is, because like you're giving them some empathy and they buy your thing. But when it comes to nonprofits and it comes to social justice issues like this, which are literally about life and death, the empathy is much larger. Like the empathy is not just for the viewer, it is also for the subject matter and for the human race and justice even. I feel like we've seen a lack of empathy in a lot of communications over the past year, and it's outside of Black Lives Matter, and it's been one of the major barriers. What do you think about that idea that designers need to have empathy as they're dealing with this kind of material?
I agree. I agree that designers always should have empathy, as you said, and it's more about like being able to reflect the needs of their audience and their constituents, and ensuring that the needs are clear and in the designs that they're creating. I think it's also about learning. I think designers really are educators. They have the opportunity to teach concepts and things that is not just empathic and not just really shows what the struggle is for people, as well as some of the solutions that have been created, but does so in a way that takes into consideration the learner. So it's just, so there's an example, one of the organizations that I gave you that example about the George Floyd video and how I had this idea of really ensuring that we, number one, were connected, and number two, that people in general really had empathy about the humanity of Black people, and how the designer was like, I have this idea, I'm going to connect them with eyes, and just seeing that technology. Well, in another example, I worked for an organization that focused on economic development and post-conflict in developing countries, and so we worked very closely with local entrepreneurs to help them to compete for competitive tenders and with international agents. So international agencies would set up camp in these post-conflict and developing countries, and they would have needs, as big as food needs, housekeeping, car services, all kinds of things. And so many things were outsourced back to the United States or their country of origin. You would have people flying in eggs from the Bible Belt and having half of them broken when they were farmers in developing countries.
Yeah.
But no one was making those connections. That's how we showed up. That's how developed, and not just America, that's how developed countries showed up in these countries. And so, it took my organization and the founder of my organization to come up with this idea to remove the barriers between the international agents and agencies and the local entrepreneurs, and say, hey, guess what? You need some eggs? Well, we have this verification system, blah, 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 blah. It was pretty complex. We also had to communicate to people the impact on people and the economy of these countries. And many times the economy, the local GDP increased significantly through doing this type of work, more so than those international agents that were in country presumably to help. Anyway, it was a pretty complex concept to do if you don't understand Keynesian theory and economics, and it was just a lot. So we created this animation, to describe what this work was. And we were able to really, through this animation, show everyone, show the participants, show the beneficiaries, show the solution, show the impact, show the vision, and the goal for the future and the transformative impact. We also were able to show the need and what happened before. We were able to show this in like a minute and a half or 2 minutes through an animation, through art, through design. And that concept we were able to share with so many people. So I didn't have to have this long-winded conversation about like, and then we match people and test tenders and all these words that no one understood. We were able to show them an animation. And so the power of that designer to just kind of hear what we were saying, who probably didn't have economic background, right. And to hear what we were saying and to understand what we needed and to be able to translate that message and to showcase so many of the different individuals and groups that were impacted by the work that we were doing and to make it very clear took a lot. And it was something that only a designer could do because we had those ideas, but a designer understood what images to use, what colors to use, what not to show, what to show, in order to really deepen the understanding of what we were doing and showcase the need and showcase the vision and the impact and tell this whole story in the blink of an eye. And it was brilliant and genius. And I think that many organizations and many topics and many social justice concerns can be further illustrated for people and clarified for people through the impact of design work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a fantastic example because it educated and promoted and convinced people to participate. So I want to double check the time here. We have about 16 minutes. So if anyone has any questions, please post them in text chat. But I wanted to go back in history a little bit, and I'm wondering, how did you first get into communication? Like, was there a specific event or something that happened? Or did you always know this was your thing?
No, well, I studied voice. I went to Hampshire University. I studied vocal performance. I was supposed to be a famous singer. I have a beautiful singing voice. No, I'm just kidding. Well, I do, but that's what I was supposed to do. I don't know what happened. But it wasn't really, I didn't grow up thinking, oh, you know what I'm going to do? But I could not have chosen a better career. I could not have enjoyed what I've been doing more, even when it was hard, even when I didn't sleep for 6 weeks, even when, and that's just one experience. Like I've had many experiences like that. It's never been bad because I knew I was in one of those professions where I could see the impact of my work every day. Like I knew what I did made a huge difference on not just one person, but on many people. And I'm always been very grateful for that. And it creates this feedback loop of type A crazy, because it's just like, well, it's for everybody. So I have to work really hard, and I never, so work-life balance is my challenge. But anyway, your question was, did I, what was there a spark? Was there something? And I think it was, I first started in this field. I always have been a volunteer. So I grew up in Queens. I grew up in New York. I think you're hard pressed as a New Yorker to not be politicized at a very early age. And by that, I mean, be very aware of politics and the impact of political decisions and how it impacts your everyday life, and how it trickles down to your community, and how you have a voice. And, in New York, it's a very political town if you roll in those circles. And so you're really able to get involved in your local politics and in your local lawmakers, and become a nuisance if you need to. And so, I was surrounded by people in my life who were, rabble rousers, who, lived in within the ideology of rabble rousers. And so, for me, I started getting involved in politics and in protesting and in community work and in community service, probably as young as 13. And then, at one point I knew someone who was running for Congress, and he asked me to volunteer. Well, I volunteered at first, and then he asked me if I would choose to work for him as his fundraiser, or his finance director is what they called it on the campaign trail, and, you know, worked with him to raise money for his campaign. And I knew nothing about that profession even existed. I didn't even know what fundraising was. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, what do you, and he had to explain, broke it down for me. This is what fundraisers are. This is what they do. This is how they communicate. And I was just like, well, that does sound like me. So I took that opportunity. And in that environment, unlike any other environment probably that I've been in since, we had I had a dual role. I not only was raising money, which I was doing, and with from regular old people, you know, like literally, you know, just people, he ran in Brooklyn, but people who lived in Brooklyn, like I would go door to door and ask for money, or, you know, meet rich people and ask them for as much as they could possibly give under the law. And so it was like real people, but it wasn't just raising money. It was raising money for a campaign. So I always said, you know, I was always the one on the campaign, like, we are here to try to put a man in a seat in the House of Representatives. So it was like, not only were we raising money, but there was a reason. And in order for him to win, we had to communicate who he was. Like, I couldn't just ask for money. Hey, can I have $10? I had to let people know exactly what I was doing, exactly who this candidate was, exactly what transformation he was going to bring to this community, exactly why he was better than the other candidate. Not only did we need your money, but we needed your vote, and we needed your money, and we needed your, like, it was all intertwined. So I learned at a very, you know, early point in my career that I needed to communicate effectively to convince people to do the thing that we needed them to do, whether it was for their own good or not. I had to find the right words, the right message, the right passion, the right entry point for different people. Our district was very diverse. We worked with the richest people in Brooklyn and the poorest people in Brooklyn. So clearly I wasn't having the same conversation with the same people all the time, every day. I had to understand how to differentiate my approach. I had to think about all of those things as the fundraiser, as the person who needed them to go that extra mile. Not just vote, but also give money. And so I realized that those two things were inextricably linked, that in order to promote change for people who may or may not care, or may not know that they have the opportunity to usher in change, I had to share the message and the words and the information and the solution and any of those things that I knew I had to do, and my people knew, and our team knew. I had to be able to translate and to communicate that most effectively, so that we could have this whole planet full of change makers and transformative individuals. And so that's when I realized the power of communication, and the power of communicating effectively and consistently, and concisely, and in a diverse way, so that everyone received the message in the way they needed to receive it.
I mean, going door to door in Queens,
Brooklyn.
will teach you, Brooklyn, excuse me, will teach you very quickly that you need different messages for different people. Having lived in Brooklyn myself, so we ain't all the same there, but it's a good mix, right? Don't get me wrong. Yeah. So, you know, is there something you wish you had learned before you got into all this? Or do you have any like words of advice for college students who are looking at the change you're making in the work you're doing and thinking, you know, I'd like to have that kind of impact, or I'd like to work with those kind of messages? What's your advice?
I would say we are all change makers. So I didn't know, when I knew that my life was supposed to have a ripple effect and was supposed to impact people, which is why I thought performance was really my impact, because I had this talent, and I didn't want to just sing in my shower. Like I felt like I had this opportunity to share my talent. I felt compelled to share my talent with others, right? And then when I realized that I had these other talents as well, that could actually help change the political landscape of our society and our culture, I was like, well, I need to do that. Duh. And so I always felt like a change maker. And I think that what I knew, which was just simply reinforced over the years, is that change is everywhere. There are entry points all over the place. I've worked for so many different organizations that had so many different missions because I love my career so much that I really wanted to have a broad impact. I wanted to do all of the things. I couldn't just say, I'm going to impact education, or I'm going to impact, racial justice. I wanted to do all of it. I wanted to impact everything. And so I made sure that I contributed to organizations. So I would say that what was reinforced for me was that we all have the opportunity and the ability to affect change in big ways, in small ways, in ways that help us to engage with our brothers and sisters, in ways that help us to engage with a broad mass group of people. I think as designers, your ripple effect, your impact can be a lot broader because more people will see what you do. And if you approach your work, if you have this need or desire or interest in changing the way the world is, in transforming society and helping us to evolve as people. I always felt that way. I always felt like we as humans evolve. It's part of my job is to help us all evolve. Like, we're all going to do this together. We're all going to shift. I'm going to teach you everything I know, and you're going to teach me everything you know. We're going to do this together. And so if you have that spirit, as I did, that change maker spirit, know that you have the power to change. Know that it exists to change the world. Know that you have the power to impact the way other people see the world, no matter how big or how small you feel your circle is. And if we think about how we can utilize our sphere of influence, whether it be our family, our friends, our community, our company, our broad society, our social media following, if we understand and bring that change, that transformative spirit into the work that we're doing, and think about the impact that we as individuals can have, then the world will change, because we will all be bringing that spirit into everything that we do. We will follow all the breadcrumbs. We will never allow for our gifts and our skills to lay dormant, and we'll never allow our gifts and our skills to live in a silo, in a closet, in our room. We will share that with the world, because that's the way we together as a society will evolve.
I love that. That's awesome. And you're right. There are countless points of entry into that, right? It doesn't just have to be one thing. There's a lot of good that still needs to be done in the world.
Yeah. A lot of stuff. There's a lot of, we're humans. We're flawed just by nature. And so there's never going to be a time that we're going to be perfect, because that's just not how we were created. So we were created to grow. We were created with a growth mindset, and to try to avoid a fixed mindset. And so we must lean into that growth mindset and understand that there's always change. There's always, tomorrow is always, our cells refresh, like we're always different. So keep pushing, keep moving, keep it going.
So, with that in mind, who inspires you? Do you have favorite intellectuals or bloggers or artists like that?
I feel like I don't have like these really great names. So I guess I'm inspired by so many people, by artists mostly, by Maya Angelou, by Toni Morrison, who's like Toni Morrison's probably my favorite inspiration of all time, just given her ability to be so to tell such fearless stories and to show up when it's important. But anyway, my inspirations are generally artists. They're performers. They're people who do things like Harry Belafonte, who was not just a performer, but also an activist. People who use their platform, people who leverage their gifts in order to make transformative change. Those are sort of the people that I always look to, and I always think about. Historical figures, people like that who have had impact and who really push the envelope, but mostly artists, people who just kind of have a gift and utilize that gift in ways that just transform individuals and inspire individuals, so that those individuals can then pay it forward. And so, those are a couple.
Yeah, so when someone gets a platform because of their creative abilities, they're able to reach an audience that might not hear a message from someone who is only working in just that mission.
Right.
it's much bigger and
Right,
has a
right,
much
right.
more impact. It often seems to offend some of the audience, and that's good. It's still making them think, right? It's still asking them to draw a line and be on one side of the line or the other.
Well, artists are able to really allow you to see yourself differently, as well as the world differently. Artists inspire you to think about transformation in the way that it translates to society and as us as individuals. So they challenge us to envision a different type of world and to envision a different type of individual self. They create these images, these landscapes, these ideas, these concepts that inspire us to dig deeper. And so whether or not you agree, whether or not it's controversial, it's really what you're taking from that. And it allows you to then, you know, utilize whatever passion, whatever that kicks up for you, and bring that to your work, and you know, use the way that it shows up for you in your inspirational and your transformational activities. So that's why I think that artists are so incredibly powerful, because as you said, Tor, they're able to kind of cut through all that noise. They're not wonks, they're not policy wonk, you know, many are, some are, but they're not, they don't approach that way. They approach in a different way. They approach in a way that connects to your the emotional side of your brain. And it allows that emotional side of your brain to then inform the other side, you know, the more cerebral side, the tactical side. And it allows if your spirit is changed, then your activity is changed. So that's why I really love artists and consider myself one.
So we only have a few minutes, but I want to just ask you about this one thing you just mentioned. You're talking about the emotional side of how we react to things, and then the sort of, you know, intellectual wonky side of how we react to things. In your work as a communicator and in social justice, which of those sides moves people more?
It's interesting that you asked that question. I learned very early on, even in my training as an artist, that both sides of my brain worked equally. And I think that in order for us to really be stimulated, your heart and your head have to match. They have to meet together. I don't know if one outweighs the other, because you might think I would say your heart is the first thing that is moved, but your heart can move, but you won't take action if your head isn't attached, if your head doesn't understand its pathway to match your heart. So I think that as communicators, we have to communicate to both the heart and the head, so that we not only ignite the spirit and the emotional side of us, but we know as individuals what to do with that. We know how to move. We know how to move the needle. We know what action to take, because we understand what our emotions need, and then but our heads are also satisfied, and we also understand what next steps are. So I think that it's really a combination of both of those things.
It's an interesting balance, right? And because we hear this debate in business, even, you know, well, we have to tell stories and they have to have this emotional hook. Okay, but if we don't give them data, then they won't. Okay,
you need
actually, it's both.
You need both. And some people weigh differently, right? Like some people weigh more on the data side, and some people weigh more on the emotional, artistic side. And so you give people both, and they're stimulated in both ways. And so for me, I feel very fortunate that I think that I'm pretty equal in both of those. I'm motivated by both data, and I'm motivated by by emotion. And so I'm able to kind of like code switch and be in those different rooms in different places. But I also am able to translate the message of these really cerebral topics for an emotional audience. And I'm also able to provide a data-focused audience, an emotional prospect with points and pain points and situations that allow them to either pay for it or participate in it, et cetera. So that would be the uniqueness, I think, of my journey.
I think it's a really powerful skill, and it's one that we would all benefit from practicing in our own work, in our own movements, and so on. It is now 11:30, and so we're about at the end. Does anyone have any last questions before we wrap up? All right. Well, Kailee, thank you so much. This has been a really informative and entertaining conversation. I really appreciate your time here today. I've learned a lot, and I think you've given us a lot to think about with, your comments about how to communicate with people, and even just sort of the everyday managing a social justice crisis. Like it's amazing. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you for having me here.
I
Had a wonderful time. Thank you all so much. And I really hope you enjoy your day and the rest of your time in Tor's class.